Hi everyone, and welcome to my March wrap-up video. It was something of a disappointing month in that I read a lot of quite average seeming books, but they were still interesting to talk about, so we'll better get started. The first one was A God in Every Stone by Camilla Shancy. It's got some spectacular, like this cover art seemed quite ominous, to be honest. I was thinking, what have I got myself into here? Purple with semi-naked children, this doesn't look good. It's not actually that bad. The story is basically about an English woman and well, at the time an Indian man. The area becomes Pakistan later. And their lives are interrupted by the First World War in quite a bad way, and they meet afterwards, and it's kind of, well, it's not really about them, really. It's sort of almost more about the character who links them, who's the brother of the brother of the Indian man. And it looks like it's going to talk about some great archaeological treasure. It starts off, there's a prologue, which is set, when is it set? BC. Let me have a look. Where are we? Yeah, 515 years BC. That's the only real bit where that happens. It doesn't really cover this massive cover scale time period, as some people seem to think it will. It's really just over maybe 10 years, but 15 years, it says right here on the back. Yeah, it looks like it's going to talk about this great archaeological treasure, and it absolutely sets up for that, and it gets to the point where you think, oh, we've reached, the climax of the story, and then it takes a sharp left turn into this completely different story, which is kind of signposted already. Looking back, you can see that there's something coming. It does get signposted, like I say, but it just seems so sudden and bizarre. And I agree that it does represent the way that this despicable act by the British, somewhat terrorist act by the British, interrupts people, the way that these things interrupt your life, and the normal things are just, so it shows that quite well. But I didn't find the second story anything like as compelling, so I was pretty disappointed. I definitely prefer the, I'm more into history than people, to be honest. People. So yeah, it let itself down in a way, I felt. But one of the good things about it was that it does show that there is a certain non-heterosexual element, maybe, to the native culture of the area, which the British are trying to stamp out, and it's just presented as just a thing. It's not really treated like a bad thing, other than by the British. So I felt that was very good. Some good representation. Unfortunately, the next book was also kind of average and did not have any representation. And that was The Year of the Runaways by Sanjeev Sahota. This book is, well, it keeps getting nominated for prizes. Unfortunately, it was basically set up to fail for me because the prizes that it is getting nominated for is alongside The Spring of Caspar Meyer, which was absolutely a 5-star novel for me. This is great, you should read this. So this was never really going to quite live up to those standards. And then it kind of let itself down a bit further, I think. It's really a story about Indian... Well, they're not all illegal immigrants, but they might be using the legal route, but for dodgy reasons. So basically, it's about how they're so desperate to get to a better life in the UK that they're prepared to do anything, and then of course the life that they end up in is pretty grim. And yeah, it's important, and I think it shows, some people are very desperate to get out of the situations that they're in, and I'm not sure whether the situations that they're in really necessarily compare to the kind of things that the Syrian refugees are currently trying to escape from, but it does feel like a very it feels like a novel of the moment, this one. Unfortunately, for all of its contemporary relevance, it didn't seem particularly alive. It was sort of lacking in, I don't know, very subjectively, it seemed to be lacking in a sort of spark that would have just lifted it up to the next level. So, yeah, your mileage may vary, however, with that one. That's a very kind of a reason. And then we get to another book which I found quite average, which was Gates of Thread and Stone by Laurie Lee. This was recommended to me by Lucy. She reckons it was absolutely amazing. And unfortunately, I found it merely average. And well, I think this was the one where I've got this massive review on Goodreads where the more I think about this book, the less sense it seems to make. So yeah, I wrote that nearer the time. So fortunately now I'm kind of blanking some of this out. So you should go and read that if you're wondering. But yeah, didn't like this so much. There is one character in it which I do like because he reminds me of one of my own characters. And there is some bisexual representation in this, which is also good. But beyond that, it just seemed very run-of-the-mill. So I was having a pretty disappointing month. So it's just as well that the next book was The Last Empress by An Chi-min. I've already read the first book about the first book she wrote about the. Here we go. I'll get it out for you. The youth of this particular character. So it's about the final empress of China, and the two of them are basically a biography of her life, and it's obviously it is fiction, so you see it from her perspective, and obviously it is very biased towards her. But I did really enjoy these books. When I got this one, it was while I was at uni, and I basically picked it up at the secondhand bookstore, and then went home and read it in one sitting all evening. I could not put this book down, which was a real tragedy, really, because I also had an essay due at 8 a.m. the next morning. So at around about midnight, I finished this book and started writing the essay. Don't recommend that, but don't recommend that. Don't do that. Seriously, kids, don't. It's not good. You need sleep. Really, you need sleep. Lots of sleep. But it does give you a sense of how compelling these books are. So, yes, I was very keen to read the second one, and I eventually got around to buying and reading the second one, and I enjoyed it greatly. And in many ways, it's kind of funny that I ended up reading it in the same town as I bought the other one, because I was away last month. I don't know if anyone noticed that I sort of went quiet on my other Twitter. Well, I didn't really go quiet on my other Twitter account, but anyway. So yeah, that was good. That was a 4-star book, although unfortunately it is kind of lacking in the queer representation. And I think the next step really is to find some actual historical accounts of, I really can't pronounce her name, Suthi, and read something that's maybe a bit less utterly pro her and see how things go. But that is something that I'm quite interested in, queens and how they deal with power, even though everything is very patriarchal. Not just in China. I'll shut up and tell you about the last book which I read, which was The Untold War by Nancy Sherman. And it's basically, well, I thought it was going to be a book about PTSD, and it isn't. It's more about philosophy and morality and how these things apply to, well, it is particularly to the US Army in the Middle East currently. But obviously her points are more general, and she is American. She has worked with lots of American soldiers and veterans, so that is definitely the context in which she is writing this, but obviously the lessons can be more widely applied. It seems like a strange thing to have picked up. It was, like I say, I thought it was going to be different to what it actually was. But it was still interesting, and some good character background for my own novel, but yeah. So if you want, it's a bit creepy, the way he looks at you. I found that quite creepy. But anyway, just like you got it sitting by your bed and you think, I'm gonna put stuff on top of. Yeah, didn't like that so much. But yes, yeah, if you want something which will give a different perspective on kind of modern warfare, then I would recommend this. But not if you're looking for a kind of more of a medical account. It doesn't really talk about that at all, or at least not to the extent that I wanted it to. Yeah, so that was March. It started off quite slow and ended up a bit better than average, but still haven't read anything to really properly be exciting yet. The first book for April was quite exciting, so you've got that to look forward to. April has been better so far, definitely. So come back next month. Yeah, do.